Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. For an individual mostly known for his diplomatic and strategic abilities, Obi Wan Kenobi sure gets into a lot of one-on-one duels. As a matter of fact, he's had some really great rivalries throughout his time as a Jedi.
Hello there.
This includes multiple fights against Darth Maul, multiple fights against General Grievous, and also Asajj Ventress. But his most famous opponent was always Anakin Skywalker, his former apprentice and now mortal enemy. The two individuals have sparred on numerous occasions during their time within the Jedi Order together, and after Anakin's fall to the dark side, they would proceed to have a trilogy of duels that are as famous as any in the Star Wars lore. And now that the Kenobi series is over, we've been able to see the second battle in this trilogy, and I gotta say, this is one of the best trilogy of duels in all of Star Wars history. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the evolution of these three battles, which are all conveniently spaced 10 years from each other. We're going to take a look at the evolution of combat styles, the mentality of each fighter, and their abilities. What makes the Anakin versus Obi Wan duels so special is the fact that they've trained together for more than a decade. Generally within the Jedi Order, the Master teaches the apprentice their own preferred lightsaber form. Obi Wan Kenobi originally was a form for Ataru adherents. He was following in the footsteps of his master Qui-Gon Jinn. But after witnessing Qui-Gon Jinn's defeat by Darth Maul using Form 4, Obi-Wan would distance himself away from Ataru and began training himself in Form 3, a more passive and defensive shell technique. Anakin Skywalker would also learn Form 3 as a result, but his impulsive and aggressive nature would lead him to becoming a Form 5 Shen and Jem So style fighter. Form 5 lightsaber technique actually directly evolves from Form 3. Form 3 was all about defense and waiting for your opponents to make a mistake. Form 5 adherents were all about adding additional offensive techniques that could shorten the length of a battle. This is one of the major philosophical differences between Form 3 and Form 5. Form 3 is all about being conservative and patient, whereas Form 5 says that the longer the battle takes, the more opportunities there are for bad things to happen. So they want to end it as quick as possible. Now, Anakin Skywalker, being so naturally gifted in the Force, was a very strong lightsaber fighter. But as a Padawan, he didn't spend that much time practicing his technique, but that would all change after Count Dooku cut his arm off. From then on, Anakin would become a fanatic when it came to lightsaber practice. He would learn all of the different techniques, and he would eventually modify Form 5's basic stance to be more efficient against blaster fire, although his main focus with Form 5 was learning power attacks that could quickly disarm his opponents. Even before Anakin falls to the dark side, there were plenty of signs of his aggressive and darker nature. The Skywalker family in general has a large amount of bloodlust hidden in their personalities, and it just takes the right amount of passion to awaken this kind of darker side of them. A classic Skywalker move that we'll see Anakin and Luke Skywalker do on numerous occasions is just repeated strikes against an enemy's guard that increases in tempo and rage the longer it is unsuccessful. It's the ultimate personification of Anakin's relatively simple mind. He does not look for counters or parries or trick moves. He just wants to blast through his opponents and bury them. The experience with Count Dooku and 3 years on the front lines of the Clone Wars turned Anakin into a killing machine. He already had the natural skill and force powers, and now he had the discipline, practice, and real-world experience to go along with it. Anakin would become one of the most disciplined and focused duelists in the entire Jedi Order, and unlike other powerful Force users, Anakin didn't rely on Force powers during his battles. He generally relied on good swordsmanship. It was all about pure speed, strength, agility, and technique. When Anakin goes up against Obi Wan Kenobi, his former master, during the Mustafar battle, he clearly can't match him physically or through the Force. But luckily, Obi Wan doesn't need to because he's sparred with Anakin more than anyone alive. The only thing that he hasn't seen from Anakin is what happens to him when he taps into the dark side and uses his anger to fuel his power moves. But take a close look at Obi Wan Kenobi's open stance here right before Anakin jumps into action and starts fighting against him. Obi Wan Kenobi is actually quite relaxed. He's almost opened up his body for Anakin to strike. We have to remember, at this point, this was the first time Obi Wan Kenobi has seen his apprentice since leaving several days ago for the Outer Rim. Even though Obi Wan Kenobi saw Anakin murder a bunch of younglings, lead an assault on the Jedi Temple, and physically abuse his wife, he's still probably not mentally prepared for this battle against his former apprentice. I mean, he even begged Yoda to let him go fight Palpatine instead of Anakin.
Send me to kill the Emperor. I will not kill Anakin.
If you take a look at Obi Wan versus Maul on Tatooine, the Jedi Master falls into Form 3 ready mode, which involves holding the saber above one's head and turning the body sideways in order to minimize the profile of his body. He was clearly ready to fight with Maul, and in this scene, he's clearly adopted a completely different stance against Anakin. When Anakin starts his attack on Obi Wan Kenobi, he launches a flurry of combos with both grace and tenacity, and Obi Wan returns the favor with a blur of defensive parries. If you take a look at actual real-world sword fights, no one is ever able to block so many strikes in a consecutive order. The Jedi were able to do this for two reasons, basically. One, they practiced these basic forms and combos religiously to the point where they remembered them even when punch drunk and badly injured. The second part of this was that the Jedi, when fighting at higher levels and higher speeds, completely let the Force into their bodies and allowed it to control their movements. It's said that the Jedi don't even think during these moments because there is no time. They simply fall into the rhythm of combat. Obi-Wan maintains a defensive posture the entire fight, which is usually what he does anyway. He's waiting for his opponent to make the wrong move, like, say, attack him while he's standing on the high ground, which makes me rethink Obi-Wan Kenobi's opening stance. Maybe he's doing that to goad Anakin into attacking him in the first place. But in order to build up to that moment where Anakin makes a huge error in judgment, all Obi-Wan really has to do is frustrate Anakin by blocking his best efforts and his most intense attacks. Anakin gets so frustrated that at one point he even tries to use a Force push on his master in order to throw him off his guard. But no matter how hard Anakin tries, Obi-Wan Kenobi is always going to be one step ahead of Anakin, and so he manages to stay alive just long enough for Anakin to make that very, very fatal mistake. Okay, we're not going to count Obi-Wan's encounter against Vader on Mapuzo here as a duel. Kenobi spends half that battle running away from Anakin and then gets dragged through some hot coals. What is important about this battle is we see how much Anakin has changed in the 10 years since his gruesome injuries on Mustafar. Vader clearly is a lot slower, and he seems to rely more on power strikes. At the same time, Vader heavily uses the Force to control his enemies, something that Anakin rarely ever did. There is a huge difference between the first and second duel from the Kenobi TV series. In the first duel, Obi-Wan Kenobi wasn't ready at all. He was also just on the run by himself. He wasn't trying to protect anyone, which is really important. But the second time around, that changes. Obi-Wan Kenobi makes a conscious choice to separate himself from the members of the Path in order to lure Darth Vader to him. In this second duel, Obi-Wan chooses the battle and why they fight. Right before they start swinging at each other, we notice that Obi-Wan Kenobi has entered his Form 3 ready stance. His demeanor clearly shows that he is not only physically ready, but also mentally ready to do some damage against Vader. It also helps that his former apprentice is clearly a murdering monster and his face is hidden beneath a scary helmet, so we can no longer identify him. This duel is a lot slower than the one we saw in Episode 3. Clearly, these two individuals have not fought against each other in a while. Vader's style has also changed drastically. Vader's had to alter his Form 5 technique because his suit is incredibly heavy. There's a lot of latency and delay on the movements of his cybernetic limbs compared to his actual arms and legs. And plus, you have the limited mobility and the lack of flexibility from his cybernetic limbs. The gaps in between Vader's combos now are noticeable because his speed is so much slower, and this gives Obi-Wan Kenobi the opportunity to counterattack in between strikes. I would say that in previous fights, Anakin was dealing the majority of the offensive strikes. In this fight, it's much closer to 50-50. Obi-Wan Kenobi also seems to be able to redirect Vader relatively easy, keeping the larger fighter off balance. This is classic Form 3 Surusu mixed with some light martial arts that Obi-Wan Kenobi also learned as a Jedi. It's all about keeping your opponent off balance and then redirecting their strikes to the ground or to the side. When the fight gets into the rock spire area of the location, we can see both fighters are a bit rusty. Obi-Wan begins throwing some wild thrusts and attacks at Vader, which definitely isn't a Form 3 technique style move, and Vader seems to be struggling with the confines of the location. The spires keep intercepting his long-winded moves, which are pretty easy to telegraph. Eventually, Vader does get the upper hand by using the Force to collapse the ground beneath his former master. He then buries him beneath a bunch of rocks. It's at this point Obi-Wan Kenobi goes from just normal him to Super Saiyan Mode 2, maybe? It's because he taps into the foundation of what makes him fight, and it's a beautiful thing. Obi-Wan Kenobi thinks about protecting Leia and Luke, who are ironically the son of Darth Vader. The tables have really flipped in the second duel compared to the first duel. In that first duel, it was Anakin who was fighting for those he loved, even though he did just strangle Padme. But he was the emotional one. And now Obi-Wan Kenobi was using emotions and, dare I say, attachment to the Skywalker twins to fuel his force powers. This is probably the most passionate we've seen Obi-Wan Kenobi in battle since he took on Maul right after Qui-Gon Jinn was killed. Obi-Wan Kenobi with emotions is almost overpowering. He kind of just goes into God mode and starts offensively using the Force, which is a big deal for a Jedi. It's one thing to Force push a droid, it's a whole nother thing to wrap the Force around your former apprentice and throw him like a rag doll and then fling a bunch of rocks at his face. Vader and Obi-Wan lock blades once again, and now it's even more apparent just how slow Vader is compared to when he was a Jedi. He also seems to be much weaker as well, and he's unable to use his tremendous weight and strength to force his will over Obi-Wan. At one point, Obi-Wan just drops his form completely and starts bashing Vader's respiratory system with the hilt of his saber. This is definitely not Form 3 technique. A few strikes later, and it's completely over. Obi-Wan lands a strike on Vader's helmet, revealing a portion of his burnt face. Obi-Wan Kenobi could have ended Vader, especially after the Sith Lord admitted that the Anakin he once knew was completely gone. Vader had many enemies that would have thanked Obi-Wan for it, but no, instead, Obi-Wan just walks away again. I don't know if this is because he loves Anakin, or maybe he's just a coward, but the second duel does confirm what many of us knew all along, and that's that Obi-Wan would never kill Anakin. And it shouldn't surprise us. Because as I've said many times before, Obi-Wan represents all the good the Jedi could have been. Even though Obi-Wan Kenobi is a very dedicated Jedi, his capacity to love has always been something very special about him, and is actually what connects him to Anakin so well, I think. We see that whenever Obi-Wan does disobey the Council, he does it for love. Like when he runs to Satine Kryze's aid when her government is overthrown by Maul, or like when he questions Yoda's order to go and fight Anakin in Episode 3. Obi-Wan's true source of power, just like Harry Potter's, came from his love of others. Whether it's sacrificing his life for the members of the Path or some clone soldiers or the children of his former apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi always fights beyond his own capabilities when something he loves is at stake. By the time Obi-Wan battles Vader for the third and last time, he's only 10 years older from the second time around. Vader will also have aged the same amount of time. We now know about Vader's limitations as a fighter, and I don't think Obi-Wan Kenobi got that much weaker while he was just waiting in the desert. We've seen much older fighters like Count Dooku and Yoda be very, very strong up until their deaths. We know also that Obi-Wan can't kill Vader here because Obi-Wan feels sorry for Anakin and loves him. But Obi-Wan also understands that if he stays amongst the living, Vader will keep coming after him. And every time that Obi-Wan defeats Vader and hurts him, the worse Vader's anger and pain will get. The best thing that Obi-Wan can do in this situation to save Anakin is to actually let Vader kill him. Obi-Wan, as usual, was playing the long game, the extremely long game. By allowing himself to die here, he deprives Vader of the very fuel he needs to keep on going on his path towards the dark side. By dying, he gives Anakin a chance to come back and take over his body. Well guys, that is my analysis of these three amazing duels. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy.